Welcome to the second episode of WDTD's new webinar series, Research to Operations, Operations to Research Tales, Roots. In partnership with NSSL, this new series goes beyond tales from the testbed to highlight experimental tools and techniques that are already being used in morning operations. I am Elisa Bates of OU0 WDTD, and I'm here with Jessica Blair, also from CRO WDTD. Today's webinar will feature several personnel from or formerly from NWS Central Region and a researcher and developer. First, Chauncey Schultz of WFO Bismarck and Ariel Cohen, formerly of Central Region and now of WFO LOX, will present about Central Region's Convective Warning Mutual Aid CWMA project. Then, Michael Holland, also from WFO BIS, will present about his participation in the Threats in Motion TIM hazardous weather testbed experiment and how TIM ties in with CWMA. Following their brief presentation, we will dive into a discussion with all of our presenters, adding Jenny Pittman from Central Region Headquarters, who is involved with future planning for the CWMA program, and Greg Stumpf of CSU CIRA and NSSL, the lead TIM developer. During this discussion, we'll speculate on how the CWMA program could benefit TIM, what CWMA might look like in the TIM era, and similar topics. As this is only our second Roots webinar, let me take a moment to list the objectives of this new series. As I mentioned, the series expands beyond the HWT to highlight experimental tools and techniques that are already being used by the field. Our hope is that this webinar series will improve communication and collaboration amongst NOAA and NWS. And as regional science sharing webinars are popular, we hope to help the O2R process by bringing these new regional tools or applications to the national scale. Note that although these tools are being used in operations, they are still experimental and must go through NWS's approval process before they become operationally supported. This is true of everything we will discuss today. Everything is experimental. With that, I'll now turn things over to Ariel Cohen, followed by Chauncey Schultz, and then Michael Holland to kick us off with a brief overview of the CWMA program and then TIM.
I'm Ariel Cohen, and I am very proud to be here today as the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Los Angeles, Oxnard, California, as previously the MIC of the Pueblo, Colorado Forecast Office in the western part of Central Region. And during my time there, we had a challenge laid out to all the MICs and HICs back in 2022 to come up with some earth-shattering big idea, a revolutionary idea that could help transform the way we do business in the National Weather Service to keep improving and delivering the highest quality world-class services to our partners and customers. And so the idea that I came up with effectively is translated to the Convective Warning Mutual Aid concept and program. And before I get into the details of this, I want to bring up an article that Jenny had shared with me about how mutual aid is used in other fields, specifically in the medical field. So as many of you know, in some of the rural parts of the country, the availability of very highly trained expert surgeons and other medical professionals can be very limited. And so when emergencies come up and someone needs urgent care to have very, very technical oriented type surgeries or procedures done, it can be a challenge and it can take time, and minutes really save lives. And so what we're talking about here is in the medical field, being able to bring in virtually experienced surgeons, university, medical personnel, people with a tremendous amount of experience can virtually go in and be the guiding hand of support for the nurses and other doctors at some of these more remote locations to help them save lives, to provide that expert guidance in being able to work through the surgeries and other medical procedures that without virtual technology we would not be able to accomplish. And that very community-oriented way of solving problems together within a very distributed field structure within the medical community is exactly what we're doing here with convective warnings in the Convective Warning Mutual Aid Program. So pretty much taking this into severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, This program establishes an on-demand radar team drawing upon subject matter expertise anywhere in the Weather Service, combining that with convective understanding, mesoscale analysis to really support convective warning decision-making. I'm sure we could all agree that convective warnings are one of the most challenging and very important parts of our jobs. We're talking about minutes that are life and death decisions that come out of the warnings and the preparedness from them. And so the complexities in determining whether do we warn or not, do we issue a downstream warning, how do we account for deviant storm motion, how's the mesoscale environment going to create nonlinear processes that drive a very complex set of steps that we need to get warnings out for. It's helpful to have experts working together with us. And even as someone, myself, has issued thousands of warnings across the country, it's always helpful to have that guidance and support, just like in the medical community, to make the best possible decisions as a whole region, as a whole agency concept through mutual aid. Ultimately, the people providing this support are those folks that are living and breathing CAPE and shear and helicity and storms and convective warnings every single day and have that passion for severe storms. That we all have a passion for the mission, of course, but these are individuals who have really refined the R2O, O2R in that specific field of convection. And to be able to bring that in at any point to really help our service delivery is what CWMA is all about. And so as I've been alluding to, we have the providers, those are those experts that are really refining those skill sets constantly and serving as that guide, as that person that helps the local office that's still responsible for all the final warning decisions. This is not taking the warning decision-making out of the hands of the receiving forecast office. Those final decisions are always being made at the local office, but they're kind of serving in the capacity of an offensive coordinator in the ear of the quarterback. That's the analogy here. I'm not a huge sports fan myself, but I hear that's exactly how this in practice in experimental mode has appeared to be. Literally an offensive coordinator providing the plays, the strategies in order to help those tactically involved in the decision-making make the best possible decision, leveraging that expertise via mutual aid. And that those providers give that voice continuously in a strong team environment. This involves one-on-one communication or even one-on-two communication to really build that radar team with that strong foundation of experience. That's not to say the local office doesn't have experience, but we know that there's certain skill sets and training, research, and operational expertise that many people do have that can share that knowledge with the local office as the receivers of that information. Ultimately, again, the receiving forecast office makes the final decisions. This is not taking away the role of warning responsibilities at any office, but rather how can we help each other out? How can we support each other to be the best versions of ourselves in providing the highest quality services to our partners and customers? So I'm going to pass it to an actual real-time scenario that had occurred when I was the Pueblo MIC. This is the first application of convective warning mutual aid in real time. You can see Chauncey's smiling face there from Bismarck, zapped into Pueblo Forecast Office operations, helping one of the very passionate newer meteorologists work through a severe weather event over the Palmer Divide area. So I'll pass it to you, Chauncey and Michael, for more information.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And yeah, as Ariel mentioned, I had the opportunity to be involved with one of the very first deliveries of mutual aid from my home location up here in Bismarck, assisting the Pueblo office. And this was back in August of 2022. And as you're going to see in the next couple of slides, it really went very successfully. You see there on the right-hand side, the forecaster in Pueblo interrogating data, looking at things, making decisions as they normally would. But then, as Ariel pointed out, you see my face there on the left on a Google Meet. If you look at the left-hand side of this slide, you see what it looked like from my perspective on a Google Meet back in my office here. And what do I see? The AWIPS screen of the forecaster in Pueblo. So through screen sharing capabilities through AWIPS, I can actually see in real time exactly what the forecaster was looking at, including their warn gen or their hazard services capabilities to really kind of filter that conversation and make those decisions together. And as we go to the next slide, we'll see that, really the goal of this whole convective warning mutual aid, as Ariel laid out wonderfully, is to focus on anticipating things and not reacting. So the goal of this really isn't for us to, as the provider or the subject matter expert, to be saying, well, the DBZ is at this reflectivity threshold at this. Certainly the forecasters in the offices are already looking at that. This is to sort of build those next levels, to help sift through vast amounts of data and apply conceptual models that are really important to these decisions, to really not react, but anticipate what the downstream warning environment is going to look like, those nonlinear processes that Ariel talked about, trying to anticipate those as best as we can. So in real time, in this event back in August of 2022, we started early. So we opened up the Google Meet well before convective initiation was occurring, and we really built camaraderie as a team. And so we had open flowing communication for hours, which doesn't mean that we were talking the entire time. It really was just as if I was sitting side by side with the forecasters in Pueblo. And so at times we might have been sharing some information and talking. Other times it might have just been sort of open air. And that's totally fine, because that's exactly how it is when you're working really together in an office, right? It's not constant communication, but it's open flowing communication. And for a number of hours that really flew by. And it really felt like I was part of the office. And the office team at Pueblo really ensured that happened. Even during shift change, the evening shift lead forecaster came in and bantered with me. Like, it was really a camaraderie built up, and we focused on the convection, and actually things worked out very well. This very first case was a high shear, low cape environment, more of a marginal risk kind of thing. So it's not maybe be overwhelmed as we demonstrated this and experimented with it, but it went quite well. And we made some critical decisions and issued some warnings together. One of those critical decisions was to deciding to actually not reissue a warning, which was due to KDP analysis together. So looking at the dual pole fields, applying some conceptual models and understanding what the large hail potential was. And it was a successful decision. As we go to the next slide, we'll sort of see those decisions in action. And again, from my perspective, back here in my home office, I could see the AWIP screen of the forecaster in Pueblo. And actually, I was actually working with two forecasters in Pueblo, somebody that was focusing on severe convection, somebody focusing on flash flood warning decisions. As it turned out, both those decisions were made almost simultaneously. You see here on the screen that I'm talking through the tags and things and hazard services for the flash flood warning. The severe thunderstorm warning was being drawn up by the different forecaster at the time. All three of us were talking on Google Meet about what we're seeing, what we're thinking about timing, tags, all those sorts of things. And we made group decisions as we expired polygons or updated polygons along the way as well. Really worked quite well, as you can see. And as we go to the next slide, just to kind of set us up for our conversation that I know is going to be coming up later, some goals that are overarching of this mutual aid program, which probably have some ties to some things that we're going to talk about here coming up, is not only that decision to warn or not warn or continue the warning, but really thinking about polygon shaping strategies based on environment, conceptual models. That's where that provider, that offensive coordinator in the ear, can really kind of play a role. Obviously, insight into IBW tag selection or tag selection in general within WarnGen or hazard services, and then really sifting through big data, whether it's mesoscale analysis data, other fields in the radar data, and applying those conceptual models to really address that connection between the mesoscale environment, conceptual models, and future storm evolution. Again, anticipating, not reacting. And with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Michael to talk about TIM.
All right, thanks, Chauncey, and thanks, Ariel. So last spring, I had a great opportunity to participate in an experiment to test what's going to be the new warning paradigm for the National Weather Service called Threats in Motion, that's being led by Greg. And so kind of give an introduction to kind of where we are now and where we're headed. So of course, with the current warning paradigm that we're in, we issue a severe thunderstorm warning, and we can update it, but during the update, we can only shrink the area. We can't expand the area. We can't extend it forward in time. So over the next several years, we're going to be introduced across the Weather Service, at least that's the plan, is to be introduced to Threats in Motion, or TIM. There's a smaller version of it called Tiny TIM that'll be kind of like the old paradigm, but it will give us the ability to expand and extend in time. But the experiment that I participated in, which I think is really going to be a huge improvement for warnings, is called Taller TIM. And what sets that apart is that we can issue the warning, and then the warning will automatically update every morning and following the storm. And there's a lot of options that we can choose that we'll get into here in a little bit. One of the most important is that we will be able to have the warning persist with the storm, especially if it's a long track storm that we're expecting a severe threat to last for a while. will be able to issue the warning, and then that warning can follow the storm through its entire life cycle. So this is an example from my week down there of how threats in motion looks. And we'll let this play through a couple of times. And I think what's helpful for me to see how it really works is to focus just on one storm and see how those warnings evolve. There's a couple severe warnings there that I think might be easier to kind of see how threats in motion works. So one in southern Oklahoma, and then the other one at the bottom of the screen in North Texas. And, you know, we still can update, and we still should be updating in this new paradigm, the warnings about the same cycle that we do now. In those updates, it would be more, you know, reconfiguring the storm motion if needed, or reshaping the object if needed. But it's not static. It's continuously updating with the storm. And so this is just a quick look of all of the options that we as forecasters and warning meteorologists have available to us in this new paradigm. And those of you that are familiar with the current WarnGen settings, you know, those are all still here. They're all still present, but there's a lot more to this new GUI that we have available for us. Especially highlighted there is we can set the warning to automatically anticipate storm characteristics such as storm motion deviation. So if we're expecting a right-moving supercell, we can have the polygon more spread out to the right, or if it's a tornado warning and we're expecting the occlusion process with that tornado, we can set that a little bit to the left. There's, you know, even for back-building convection, we can decide to let the warning stay stagnant or to end as the storm moves forward. So there's a lot of different options here. And as we move on to the next slide, this is why I think that this Convective Warning Mutual Aid, this new initiative, I think it'll be invaluable for when we start to get into threats in motion. Speaking from personal experience down there, the meteorology isn't going to change, but the knobology is going to be very, very different. And it's going to take a while for us warning meteorologists to get used to all of that and to remember all these new different things that we have to consider when we're issuing our warnings. So I think that the mutual aid will be highly beneficial to, again, help us anticipate rather than react, you know, especially when we select that we want to persist a warning, and then at some point the storms don't last forever, so we'll have to also decide to turn the persisting off. The other thing that I think this will be really helpful with is inter-office collaboration. So once we transition into threats in motion, the polygons, you won't see any of those weird cutoff shapes at the CWA boundaries anymore. It'll be a seamless transition. So having someone even remotely that can, you know, maybe kind of coordinate with both offices as we hand off storms, I think that's something that could also be highly beneficial from this project, among many other things. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Elisa.
Thanks so much for those helpful discussion kickoff ideas, Michael. I will now turn things over to my colleague Jessica to moderate the discussion. Feel free to drop your questions for our panelists into the questions panel, and we will answer them after we talk through some predetermined questions. Take it away, Jessica.
Hi, thank you, Lisa. We're going to start with a few discussion questions for our panel. Our first question today for the panel is, what might convective warning mutual aid look like with the threat in motion?
Well, I think we could each take a little bit of time to answer that question from all of the different vantage points. I'll take it from more of the origins of this program, since I'd created this a couple of years ago. Just kind of big scale thinking here, exactly as Michael talked about. There is so much complexity that we need to be able to not only describe in the present, but anticipate into the future. Linear extrapolations of past behavior do not have any bearing on most convective evolutions into the future. And being able to anticipate what exactly is the radar going to look like in a half hour from now, in an hour from now, 2 hours from now, you know, what is the range of reasonable scenarios from dissipating storms to highly deviant intensifying convection. All of that goes into the analysis that has to be done for TIM to be successful. TIM is an incredible opportunity that we have to provide higher resolution, longer lead time, more probabilistic based types of continuous flows of information. Whether we're being explicit about probabilities or not, we're incorporating more detailed data sets and anticipating future behavior. That's a lot of very complex analysis, and having that offensive coordinator in my ear helping me out. And I'll say, again, as someone who's issued thousands of warnings, having Harry Wyman at the Storm Prediction Center being that ear with all of his convective expertise was vital in just the standard paradigm that we've had with WarnGen. TIM is going to bring our service delivery so far forward so soon so that we can really get the lead times up and the more accurate information out that can really give preparedness that goes beyond just these very discrete type data sets that we're delivering with current warnings that approaches more continuity in service. So there's my kind of ramble. Jenny can certainly take it from the future of CWMA and Chauncey and Michael in terms of their experience, and the developer there, Greg, as well. So I'll let you all chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. We're asking a lot of our meteorologists right now. They're doing everything, and warning decision-making is only part of it. So I think as we continue to move forward, we're going to need to be able to rely on expertise in issuing convective warnings and understanding technology like TIM so that when we get into a warning decision-making environment, we have that expertise and we're able to rely on someone that has a lot of at-bats using it to be able to influence the final decision. So as we continue to move forward and incorporate all of these new technologies, new data sets, it's just going to be more important than ever to have someone that's seen it a lot of times and has a lot of familiarity, not only with how to use it operationally, but how it was derived and the decisions that need to be made is really going to help out. So that's kind of how I envision the future of these two working together, is that you're just going to need someone that's seen a lot and understands what goes into it, and can really help that warning decision maker incorporate all of these new tools and technologies into their decision.
I think one thing that really, jumps out at me is when Michael was talking about, within TIM, there's a deviant motion setting, right? Which is going to be really critical to those auto-updating 1-minute updates, which are phenomenal. Probabilistic data, as Ariel was saying, it's really exciting. But if the radar operator is, understandably very focused on the storm structure and anticipating those things that they already have to do right now, that's another layer of very important information that somebody that's providing mutual aid can really help decipher. Is it more likely that there's going to be deviant motion? Based on the hodograph, is it going to be even further to the right of the mean wind? Things like that, or deviant tornado motion, for example, when we get into the occlusion process. That's kind of an aha moment to me, where that offensive coordinator in the ear can help with a very specific type of decision, among many others, of course.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate too, the whole situational aspect of it, and not losing it while you're trying to make your selections. Another thing that I think Ariel said that stuck out to me too is, what's the radar going to look like in a half hour or in an hour? And one of the unique things about using threats in motion and hazard services is that you can actually look forward in time to see how your current set of polygons are going to evolve. And, having someone else do that for you remotely, if it's a really active event, so you can focus on storm interrogation, I think that'll be very helpful. And also with the remote aspect of it too, at least up here in North Dakota, our severe weather season is in the middle of the summer, and that's when we have a lot of people going on vacation. So, with staffing issues too, it's usually really beneficial for us to have that capability to call on remote experts to help us.
The one thing that I'm also thinking of here, we tout TIM as being a way to improve lead times and make lead times more equitable for folks downstream of these long-lasting hazards. But one of the things we learned from our hazardous weather testbed experiments is that the ability to track a hazard using one event instead of a series of events that sometimes overlap at the end of one and the beginning of the other makes the managing of the warnings a lot easier now. You only have to manage one warning per hazard. That allows the forecaster to spend a little more time with their analysis of the events. And with the convective warning mutual aid concept thrown in there, that also provides additional time on the entire timeline to be really thinking about your next warning decisions.
All right, thank you guys for such a great discussion. Our next question we have is, how might the current or future CWMA program help with the implementation of the CWA agnostic threats in motion?
I'm going to pass this to Jenny for sure. One thing I want to mention, I really like how Michael also talked about the opportunity for that offensive coordinator to also be aware of what's going on in other CWAs to help with that coordination across boundaries so that the storms don't know that there are CWA boundaries. How can we smooth that transition? And so that big scale picture and coordinator role could definitely see a role there. But more tactically, as the Deputy Division Chief, I want to make sure Jenny takes it from there.
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration with convective warning mutual aid. So right now it's set up that you have one provider per warning operator. So you just have kind of a team like you would normally see in office, but done remotely. But I can envision eventually when we have enough people available that you could have a couple of folks supporting different offices at the same time and coordinating with each other kind of behind the scenes. So I think that would be really helpful as we see handoffs between CWAs and you see these threats moving into other areas, that you could have that collaboration between convective warning mutual aid providers that would be able to help smooth that transition, make sure they're on the same page about any deviant motion. Is it going to persist long enough to get into the next forecast area to make sure that we do want to extend that warning, especially if there's a population center near that border, making those decisions together and making sure that, you know, there aren't partners that are surprised or left out or not aware of changes that are coming. So I think that's a really unique opportunity where you have these providers that might be able to do a little bit more of the coordination or at least help with it as we do transition between forecast areas. And I think Chauncey and Michael might have some thoughts on that as well.
I totally agree with that. I think right now we're very much in a paradigm where occasionally we share information, you know, across CWA boundaries as we're handing storms off, but usually it's more of like, oh, this is what we're doing with our warning. And so I think having that quarterback in the ear, maybe in the ear of more than one office, as you were saying, Jenny, maybe that same mutual aid provider, maybe not the same mutual aid provider, but maybe multiple mutual aid providers that are themselves talking amongst each other could really help, you know, like, oh yeah, here's what we're seeing, you know, here's what we're talking about on that end with Bismarck. And then, you know, as it marches into Grand Forks' area, that, you know, you maybe have a different mutual aid provider that's helping them, but has that connection with the mutual aid provider here, I think could be wonderfully beneficial.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on that. Great discussion from everyone. And I don't know if Greg has anything from the more technical or whatever side of threats in motion.
Yeah, just a little background on the technical side of this. We tested this out 4 years ago, but we have built into the software a way for one forecast office to actually hand off the warning to their neighboring office, and it's through these ownership controls. So essentially, they will send a request through AWIPS to the other office, or the other office will make a request back to the upstream office whether or not they can take over that warning. And when they do, it just continues. The ownership changes on it, but the shape and all that kind of stuff, attributes of the warning, remains the same. So it's a seamless transition as they cross the border.
All right, thank you guys for that great discussion again. We got a great audience question that I'd like to throw out to you all. The question is, what kind of ops model would we need to make this work? I would like to think you would really need to make the warning support like this 24/7. So if you guys could share your thoughts on that, that would be lovely.
I can start with that one. We need people. We have a very successful remote mesoanalyst program that's going on nationwide right now, started in Central Region, but has expanded. We supported a record 13 offices on April 2nd, and it was stressful to try and find providers that were available to be able to support all those offices that day. We had everyone that we could jump in, but everybody else has a job, and it's not providing remote support. So convective warning mutual aid is still in its infancy. We've only had a couple of at-bats with it, but we're still pulling from people that have other jobs and are SUs and MICs and forecasters and can't always be available. So I think the future is finding people that are in a position to be able to provide this support as their primary job. And I don't know what that looks like, but that is the ideal model where the people that are providing support spend all of their time in the convective warning realm, and when it's not busy, they're training and they're learning about new technologies like TIM and warn on forecast and how to incorporate these into our warning decision-making process. So I think that's the future, but how we accomplish that is a little above my pay grade. So I'm not sure if anybody else has comments about what they would like to see or how they envision that future.
I'd like to follow on to what Jenny had mentioned. When we get to that future that Jenny had talked about, we're talking about the transformation roadmap to 2033, Weather Service of 2033, nimble, mobile, flexible. That's what we keep hearing time and time again from our director, Ken Graham, and the importance and the doors that opens of being nimble, flexible, mobile, when we are leveraging support across our boundaries to help give the best possible mission delivery that we can give. Mutual aid, convective warning mutual aid for something that is life and death decisions depend on it, really enables that nimbleness, mobility, and flexibility when we're helping each other out. So we get to that future, and granted, it's going to take some time, a lot of strategy that Jenny had mentioned. When we get to that point, we're opening the doors for significant headway on that transformation roadmap.
And I don't have much to add other than that's very real. You know, even the day that we did convective warning mutual aid where I was offering assistance to Pueblo, there actually was a little bit of surprise severe weather in my CWA that went on at the same time, you know, where it goes back to that distributed workflow kind of thing, you know, within the field. You know, sure, I was supporting another office and it wasn't that they necessarily needed me in my office, but could there have been somebody else that was providing mutual aid assistance to my office at the same time in that future ops oriented model? And I would say, yes, most likely, right? So it's a very real thing that maybe we were two of the busier offices that day, even on a not crazy busy, but busy enough, where no doubt there were other offices that were not busy, but those folks that maybe could have been providing that mutual aid were maybe invested in their day-to-day jobs. So it's a very real thing.
Yeah, and the ops model, yeah, it's a huge consideration as we move into this new paradigm. You know, think about one of the things about being flexible, kind of distributing your office workload based on, you know, who you have available. You know, I know one thing that's been discussed quite a bit in Central Region is if you have a very busy severe event and your staffing's a little limited, you know, see if one of your backup offices can handle grids and taps, for example. And we have been setting up this, it used to be, you know, your backup offices were your neighbors, but now we've started with this tertiary backup to have, so you don't have this overlap of if you need backup, then, well, that office is busy as well. So hopefully that helps with that. As far as, you know, the warnings go, you know, I think at least initially we'll almost have to have a warning team. And I know a lot of offices do that. We've done that here in the past, but have a warning team for each set of, instead of just a single radar operator. And if you have a large CWA like we do, and it's a whole event, then you need, you know, two sets of two people. The other thing that stuck out to me, I think it was asked in the question, the 24/7 thing, you know, that's a huge consideration too, you know, needing mutual support in the middle of the night. And the reason why that stuck out to me is that I have a well-established reputation, at least here in Bismarck, of being a night person. So, you know, trying to figure out, maybe that ties into some of the shift flexibility stuff that's being discussed around the Weather Service too, is making more people available at odd times of day that are willing to work at those times. So yeah, there's a lot to consider there.
All right, thank you guys. We got a question from the audience again. This one is, how do forecasters get involved with providing mutual aid, either for remote mesoanalysis or for convective warnings? What training should they be taking?
Another great question. Since this program is still in its infancy, we've selected providers that are known to be not only fantastic warning operators, but also really good facilitators, good communicators, have worked well with others in the past. So we have a really small cadre for now. In the future, we would like to open that up, but we're still determining best practices for how we identify those experts, not only in warning decision-making, but in facilitation. And we're working very closely with Operations Proving Ground in Kansas City. They're going to be doing a couple of experiments that are in very similar topics. And we're very interested in how they determine subject matter expertise and how they select those providers of convective warning mutual aid. So there is a path forward for those that are interested in providing convective warning mutual aid, but we don't know what that is yet. So I would just say continue to hone your skills, not only in warning decision making, but in being that offensive coordinator behind the quarterback, sometimes passing that role to others within your office and taking a step back and maybe standing over the shoulder and helping with some of those decisions from a more managerial perspective. I know as a Sioux, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to kind of stand over the shoulder of the warning operator and help guide and provide some influence on the decisions that were being made versus being the person that was making the decision. And I think for those that are interested in being providers in the future, that's a really good experience. As far as remote mesoanalysts, since we touched on that and that was in the question as well, we do have an application process every spring. And that is based on going through the MIA course, if you're not familiar with that, the Mesoanalyst Environmental Assessment course, going through all of those modules, and then also getting support from local management, and then going through an exercise in the spring with other onboarding facilitators. So there is a path, kind of clearer path forward for the RMA program. But as far as convective warning mutual aid, we hope to develop that in the future and just continue to get as much experience as you can helping others with issuing warnings.
Great, thank you, Jenny. We have one last question to wrap up today's session. This question is, how do you envision convective warning mutual aid interfacing with other mutual aid initiatives, such as the Remote Analyst Program or social media-oriented efforts like Savvy, to further supplement existing severe weather operations?
I can take that one again, and then anyone else can chime in after me. These all need to come together. There is expertise across our agency in multiple areas. And we need to make sure we're not pulling the same people every time, because there are a lot of enthusiastic people out there with a lot of skills that are overtaxing themselves in the sake of the mission. So these do all need to come together at some point. I think the early way to start is with kind of an integrated request format. We have a form right now that we use for RMA, and it would be great if we could do that with convective warning mutual aid and Savvy as well. But really, it's just figuring out how do we distribute this workload and how do we make people available, and really coordinating the efforts of all of these different mutual aid experiences, because we do want to make sure that we are unifying them and that we're all reaching the same goal at the same time. So that's a really great question, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed at a high level to make sure that we have the availability of people that can help and the people that are interested.
All right, so that kind of wraps up our session. I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to give you our outro and wrap up the session.
All right, thank you, Jessica. So where can you find more information about the CWMA, TIM, and Roots / Tales from the Testbed webinars? So you can check out the CWMA internal Google site, our internal Facet Severe VLAB page, and WDTD's Roots / Tales YouTube playlist, where you'll find all of our recordings since 2018. All right, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for to today's presenters and the great discussion. And thank you all audience so much for joining us today. We hope you will join us again next month when we will showcase some awesome new satellite products in a live broadcast from the HWT's Satellite Convective Applications Experiment. Those will be coming up on May 17th and 24th. We hope to see you then. Have a good afternoon, everyone.